All right, thanks for joining me on another episode of Why Not Go, the channel dedicated to rock and roll, especially punk and especially the Sex Pistols. Thank you everyone for watching my videos and putting likes. I really appreciate it, and I love the comments. I love it when people comment, and especially when people kind of chat with each other as well. Well, today is a very historic day in Sex Pistols history, in punk rock history, and really just in rock and roll history. August 22nd, 1975, 50 years ago today, the Sex Pistols were born. It was also a Friday 50 years ago. On this day was when Lydon met with the other members, Steve, Paul, and Glen, at the Roebuck pub on Kings Road, 354 Kings Road, under the kind of persistence of Malcolm, who wanted to try him out as a singer. There has been some discrepancy whether the date was the 23rd or the 22nd. I'm going by this book here, which I reference a lot, Paul Gorman's book on Malcolm McLaren. It's really one of the best researched rock and roll books I think I've ever read. I highly recommend it. And he says it was on August 22nd. On Sex Pistol Photo Archive, they think it could have been the 23rd, but they're not sure. So, but according to him, it was August 22nd. So I'm gonna go with that. And I often wondered if the Sex Pistols are thinking of that today. I don't know. Maybe they don't remember the exact date, but I'm sure they remember that August 1975 was a pivotal month in their lives. And all four members are really busy, and I think that's great. Tonight, PIL are playing, and they're playing in the Czech Republic at the Trutnov Open Air Festival. Pill has been really busy the last few weeks playing live, and then I think in September he does a lot of his speaking engagements. So Lydon's very busy, as well as the other three members, busy with Frank Carter and the Sex Pistols. And they're not playing tonight, but tomorrow they play at the in Margate, and I'm sure that's a very big show. Tomorrow, Saturday, August 23rd, they play Margate. And then I don't know if they do any more shows in the UK, but I know September 16th they start off their American tour at the Longhorn Ballroom, a show that I went to in 1978, and they kick off that American tour at that historic club. And so all four members are really busy and very active with their music, and I think that's great. But I wonder if they're thinking about what happened 50 years ago on this day. They might be. I don't know. So yeah, so they met with Lydon at the Roebuck pub, and just to recap what had been happening in the band, I go into great detail in my Wally Nightingale video, and I'll put a link to that video in this video. And but the Sex Pistols, well, the band that became the Sex Pistols, they were called the Strand when they started. They were going since October of 1972. So what is that, like 2.5 years before they met up with Lydon. They were playing with Wally Nightingale on guitar, Steve Jones singing. They had some other members that kind of went in and out until Glen joined, I think in 1974. And so they had been going quite a while as a music group when they met Lydon. But just to recap what was going on in 1975, in February 1975, they played their only live show with Steve Jones singing at the Tom Salter's Cafe. That's at 205 Kings Road. I also talk about that in one of my videos, and they were called the Swankers by this point. Before that, they were called the Strand. But everything really changed. Everything really changed May 12th, 1975, and that's when Malcolm came back from New York, from living in America. I think he was there about 6 months, and most of the time he was managing the New York Dolls. And they broke up down here in Florida, and then Malcolm went on a kind of a cross-country trip, or somewhat cross-country, with Sylvain, who he was very friendly with, and he went back to New York, and then eventually came back to England. So Steve Jones had been asking Malcolm to get involved with his group, but Malcolm really wasn't. He didn't. It doesn't seem like he was that interested in managing Steve Jones' group, whether it was the Strand or the Swankers. But after he came back from New York, and the New York Dolls had broken up, it's almost like he kind of really was charged up about managing another band. So that's when he really went full force and said to, Steve Jones, "Okay, I'm gonna be involved in your band." He'd been asking him for quite some time to change the name to QT Jones and his Sex Pistols, and Steve Jones didn't like the name, and it's kind of ironic because the only person who really liked the name Sex Pistols was Wally Nightingale. And but unfortunately Malcolm didn't like Wally Nightingale. He didn't think he had the look or the attitude. So one of the first things he did when he came back from New York was he went to one of their rehearsals at Riverside Studios, and he quickly sacked Wally Nightingale right in front of everybody. And then he put Nick Kent on guitar for a short amount of time. But he really made some big changes, and he said to Steve Jones, "Hey, I want you to." I don't, he probably knew he wasn't really cut out to be a singer, and so he put Steve Jones on guitar and gave him Sylvain's beautiful white Gibson guitar that he had, and started looking for a singer. So this would have been about June 1975 when he really kind of started looking for a singer really actively, and kind of like the way he found Glen Matlock, who worked at the store. The store Sex was really a hub for probably the coolest people in London to kind of meet each other. And one of the people that he tried out for a singer was this person, David Harrison. And David Harrison, he had been going to Malcolm's store when it was Let It Rock, so he'd been going to his store for a long time. He was from the East End, and obviously was a very kind of cool young guy. I think he was 19. And Malcolm said, "I want you to be the singer in this new band, the Sex Pistols, that I'm managing." And David Harrison, I believe he rehearsed with them about half a dozen times, about 6 times. Wally Nightingale actually showed up a couple of the rehearsals, which is really sad because he was still kind of hanging around the group, even though he'd been kicked out. And then, but for one reason or another, Malcolm decided that David Harrison didn't really have what it takes, and he thought he looked great. I mean, you can see in this picture, David Harrison really was a stylish young guy, but Malcolm decided that he didn't quite have the attitude. Not sure about his singing, but he decided he didn't have quite the personality to be the lead singer in this group. Just on a little side note on David Harrison, he's actually apparently a well-known painter and sculptor today. And even though Malcolm decided he wasn't right for the Sex Pistols, Malcolm kind of thought of himself as someone who might manage, a lot of bands or a few bands at once. And so he didn't give up on David Harrison. And sometime in 1976, he actually put him together with Dave Vanian, who was called Dave Zero at the time. He said, "I want you to sing with a guy named Dave," and with Rat Scabies on drums. And apparently this is before the Damned had formed. and so it's an early incarnation of the Damned, with Chrissie Hynde, who Malcolm knew very well from the shop, with her on guitar. And Dave Harrison said that it just wasn't for him. He didn't like the way Dave Anian was singing. He thought he was, at that time, trying to imitate Lydon too much. And so that band didn't work out, and David Harrison decided to give up the notion of singing in a band. And but I think that's interesting. Malcolm saw something in David Harrison and actually wanted him to sing in an early, kind of an early version of The Damned. And then after David Harrison left, Chrissie Hynde also left, and The Damned became the band we know today. Although back then, when David Harrison was singing with them, they were known as Masters of the Backside, kind of a funny name, and they later became the Damned. And so he, around this time as well, he wrote to Richard Hell and to Sylvain Sylvain. I'm not sure, he might have asked Richard Hell to be the singer, but he definitely asked both of them to come over and join his the group that he was rehearsing. And they both turned him down. And I think he wanted Sylvain Sylvain to be sort of the lead guitar player, or play with Steve in some capacity. But anyway, they both turned him down. And so, I guess he kept looking. And then in early August 1975, he was up in Glasgow selling some stolen music equipment that he had gotten from Steve Jones, and he ran into Midge and who was, I think, in the band Slick at the time. And I'll show a picture here of Midge. And so he asked Midge to be the singer in the Sex Pistols, or at least to try out. And it's funny because I spoke to Midge when he came to our town to play, and I had always thought he asked Midge because Midge was in Slick, but Midge said no, Malcolm didn't even know that he was in a band. He just liked the way he looked, because he had short hair. I get the feeling in 1975 there wasn't that many people that had that kind of punky look at all. So it must have been just sort of a small group of people, and they all kind of would know each other, or at least look at each other. And but Midge turned him down, and so Malcolm came back to London. And then on August 22nd, like I said, it was a Friday, just like today, John Lydon walked into Sex. I'll just read a passage from Paul Gorman's book when he talks about this fateful day in 1975. He says at the time, Lydon, I didn't know this, he was employed over the summer as a playground teacher for children with educational difficulties. And but he cut a remarkable figure visually, even in the context of the adventurous habitués of sex. That year he had cropped and dyed his spiky hair, giving it the appearance of being green, and wore distressed customized clothing, most notably a torn Pink Floyd merchandise t-shirt portraying the group's members. Above the logo, Lydon had scrawled, "I hate." So even amongst the customers at Sex, he was very noticeable. And so Malcolm started talking to him, and Lydon was looking for a pair of brothel creepers. But before this, several people on King's Road had already noticed him. Bernie Rhodes says that he had noticed him. Bernie Rhodes was quoted as saying, "I'm from the street and know better. That's why I was able to pick Johnny Rotten. I found him on the street and recognized that he was special." But according to McLaren, Westwood had identified a customer as John as a potential frontman, but apparently he was looking at a different John Beverly, as the potential singer for the Sex Pistols, or someone that Malcolm might want to try. So when Lydon came in and his name was John, Malcolm actually thought that maybe this was the guy that Vivian was talking about, a confusion of the Johns. And Malcolm asked him, and I asked him, as I was asking anyone who came into the shop at that time, so he was asking anyone that he thought looked good if they could sing. So he said to Lydon, "Do you sing?" And Lydon said, "Nah, only out of tune." So I thought, all right, we'll test you. I told him, if you want those shoes, I may even give them to you if you promise to head down the street to the pub around the corner called the Roebuck, where you can meet the rest of the band. And Lydon brought along his college friend John Gray, and Lydon said, "Fuck this, it sounded like a setup to me. I thought they must be joking." That really pissed off Steve. He was a bit thick and couldn't make out what I was talking about, but he didn't seem to understand me. So right away, he and Steve Jones kind of didn't get along. So so he was in there one day looking for a pair of Brawl the Creepers, and Malcolm thought that this was the John that Vivian was probably talking about. Bernie Rhodes had already had mentioned him to Malcolm, and so he was a noticeable figure on the King's Road. And so they went later that day, probably after the shop closed that Friday, and Lydon went to meet Steve, Paul, and Glen for the first time. And now I'll show a clip from a video that I've done on the whole of the King's Road, but I'll just show the clip where I'm outside the Roebuck, and you'll have to excuse me. I get a little emotional when I'm there because it is such a historic site. So this is me outside the location of the Roebuck, where the Sex Pistols met 50 years ago today. All right, we're here at the corner of Beaufort Street, Joe Beaufort Street, and King's Road, and it's 354 King's Road, and this is where a pub called the Roebuck used to be. It's funny, I always thought the Sex Pistols met at a pub right near this the sex shop, because there is a pub that's closer. But this is the location where they met. It's called Beaufort House. It's kind of high-end European cuisine. We'll try to film in there. But this was a very historic, because this is where Lydon met the other three Sex Pistols. I don't think they wanted to meet him. Obviously it was Malcolm's instigating. It was his idea. He's the one that spotted him, although some people say Bernie Rhodes spotted Lydon before Malcolm, but Malcolm is the one that wanted him in the band. So this is where he met them on that fateful day, August 22nd, 1975. This is when I hope I don't get emotional, this is when one of the greatest bands in the world got together right there at that corner. So so they met here Friday, August 22nd, 1975. And what happened was Lydon had been hanging around the shop and wearing his Pink Floyd, I Hate Pink Floyd t-shirt. And Malcolm, spotted him. As I said, there's controversy, like who spotted him first, Bernie Rhodes or Malcolm. But obviously he stood out in 1975. I love this quote from Malcolm. Malcolm said, "This guy is the one. We went along with him," said Matlock. "Who knows why?" I told him all we could think was he couldn't sing. His voice. All we could think was, oh wow, Malcolm's got us a singer who can't sing. What is that all about? I just love that. So we're going to try to film in there, but this is where the historic meeting that Malcolm instigated, where Lydon came to meet the rest of the band, who weren't very impressed. Obviously they weren't impressed. They didn't go to the first rehearsal. But it used to be a pub called the Roebuck, so let's go check out the interior. Okay, now the Roebuck is a place called the Beaufort House. kind of a high-end place with ribeye steak and stuff like that. But it looks, you can tell it's an old pub. I might have to turn this off, but I'll see. Hey, can I film the bar? Yeah. So this is the former Roebuck. Beautiful place. So this is where they met. August 22nd, 1975. All right, one more view of the former Roebuck pub on Kings Road, where the Sex Pistols first got together with John Lydon. All right, that was my clip, braving the traffic there, and that's a busy corner, Beaufort Street and Kings Road. But yes, Glen Matlock, I love that quote that I mentioned in the at the end of that clip. I love it when he says, all we could think about was that he couldn't sing. Malcolm's got us a singer, and we kept saying to each other, what's this all about? So that was after, of course, they went to the shop. And I love this quote from Malcolm. He says there was a vulnerability about him, talking about Lydon, which was very persuasive. I could see from the start that he would bring enormous charisma. So Malcolm was, you know, he had to make some hard choices, getting rid of Wally Nightingale, who was apparently the best musician in the band at the time, and putting Steve on guitar, even though Steve had never played guitar. And but he, you know, he knew what he was doing, and he insisted on Lydon. I'll just read a quote here that Malcolm said to Steve Jones in 2005 when he was on his radio show, and he's talking about that day in the at the Roebuck. I was sitting at the bar talking to a couple of guys, the typical fashion and drug victims you got on the Kings Road, and let you all get on with it. And then you came up to me and said you were going to beat the shit out of him, Steve wanting to beat up Johnny because he was playing up, and suggested taking to the shop. We dragged him there, and I was very officious. I grabbed a broken shower attachment, I don't know why we had it, and asked him to stand at the end of the shop and behave as if he was on stage. Otherwise, you were going to beat the living daylights out of him. So right away after meeting at the Roebuck, Steve wanted to beat Lydon up. He didn't like his personality. He thought he was, in his words, acting up. And but Malcolm took him back to the shop with the others, and this is the way the interior of Sex looked. And here's a picture of that jukebox. I don't know what happened to that jukebox, but here's the picture of that famous jukebox where he sang to Alice Cooper's "I'm 18," which is such a great song. And so that was it. They Steve and Paul, I think, put their faith in Malcolm, and Malcolm was quite adamant that he had found the diamond in the rough, the needle in the haystack. I don't know how else to put it, but he found the singer he was looking for. Even though Glen Matlock thought he couldn't sing, he found the singer he was looking for on this day 50 years ago. So so that was it. And then the next day they were supposed to meet at the Crunchy Frog to rehearse. That's a warehouse kind of on the east side there. And the other members, they were so not sold on him and against having him in the band that they didn't show up. You know, they could have broken up right there, or Lydon could have walked away right there, but he didn't. And he did turn up at the next rehearsal, which was in Wandsworth, and I have a video on that site too, that very historic site, the pub, the Rose and Crown. I'll show a picture here. And their first rehearsal was the following Sunday, August 31st. and they all did show up for that one, and that was just another historic day. So I'm so glad that all four members are busy doing their separate music project. Steve, Paul, and Glen doing the Sex Pistols material, and Johnny doing PIL. I think that's great. And maybe they're thinking about this day today. I don't know. My guess is they're definitely thinking about it this month, that it's been 50 years since the Sex Pistols were born. And I think if I'm going to thank anybody, I'm going to thank this guy here, because as he said, he saw enormous charisma with John Lydon, and he knew his search was over on this day. He knew he had found his singer. And I'm glad he was so insistent on keeping him as the singer. So yeah, so hope you enjoyed this video on this historic day. I think I'm gonna go play some Sex Pistols now, and celebrate. Thanks as always for watching. Until the next time, I'll be seeing ya.